Right, folks, thank you very much for coming. My name's Tim, and I am organiser of the VegFest, and I'm also the host of this panel. And I am very grateful to be here. It's an incredible privilege to be working with so many incredible campaign groups. I think we all know the work that goes into these campaigns. This session is really about collaboration and how we can move a little bit closer together, support each other more, and see if we can really get the beginnings of what we might call a mass movement that has really clear messages and really achieves our twin goals of animal liberation and a shift to plant-based food systems, and do that rapidly. So there's a lot of work been going on already. One of the beauties about this collaboration idea is it's already happening. So all the groups are seeing the value of working closer together. There's already been some incredible collaborations, and anyone paying attention will have seen that, I'm sure. But just to give you an example, just last week, Plant-Based Treaty announced a collaboration with Veganuary to get students and universities to do the Veganuary canteens all across the board. And that's an incredibly powerful collaboration, and I'm sure it'll be really successful. Earlier this year, we saw a really, really powerful collaboration with Animal Rising around about the times of Cheltenham and Aintree. And if you remember that time, there's incredible media interest, lots of groups getting involved, including Hunt Sabs, including grassroots like Merseyside Action for Animals, as well as groups like Viva and Animal Aid, who of course been doing this work for, in the Animal Aid's case, 47 years, in the Vegan Society's case, 80 years next year. So, quite the history. So what we're looking at is two questions, really. We're going to ask our panellists to just talk about a couple of campaigns they are running or they're involved with, that they'd like people to collaborate with. And I just stress at this moment that, the groups really are strong. They've got some very strong individuals who are well thought through. Some of them are quite well funded. They're quite well researched. There's some really good moves going on, but absolutely reliant on the broader support of activists and individuals across the country. Of course, I know a lot of you already here are already supporters of these groups, and the energy, the volunteer, the input, the funding, the individuals across the UK and beyond do for these groups is really, really important. And this collaboration is very much involving, everyone, not just the groups working together, but to encourage the supporters too, to really, get even more active with it. So that's really important. A mass movement has to be a mass, and so that revolves in bringing in everyone. But before we go into those questions, I'm just going to introduce one of our panellists, Layla, who's been doing incredible work with a group called Animal Think Tank. I'm sure some of you have heard of Animal Think Tank. But what Animal Think Tank is trying to do, and I should say at this point, that it was when I attended an Animal Think Tank get together in February with all the big groups organised by Layla and this firm. That was when I had this idea to do, let's do some panels on collaboration. I could see there was a hunger there. And that's a real change in culture. Those of us that go back the last 30, 40 years, we know that didn't used to happen. The groups were very almost insular. And somebody used a really good analogy yesterday. It said, like, the vegan movement and the animal movement and the plant-based movement need to come together like an orchestra. And said an orchestra isn't going to be any good with just one noise. You've got to have multiple tunes, but they've got to be in harmony, otherwise it's a horrible racket. So, when we apply that to the animal rights movement, we need to come together. We need to get our messaging, our narratives, our goals clear, and then we need to collaborate on them and make sure we push that through. So Layla and her group, Animal Think Tank, Layla's going to speak first and just actually give us a bit of perhaps a longer term view about what unity in the movement looks like and where we could be heading. So Layla, on that note, please do enlighten us.
Thank you, Tim. And before I start, I just want to say that Animal Think Tank is a team effort. So that messaging event that you went to was actually organised by Natalie and her team. And Natalie's back there taking photos. So it's really nothing, not really that much to do with me. It's all of us. So Animal Think Tank is a grassroots organisation that is helping to build a mass movement for animal freedom in the UK. We like to think of ourselves as a think and do tank, so we're doing research on all sorts of areas, but in order to put into practice to then really start campaigning and building a mass movement and collaborating with everybody else. This idea of an orchestra really resonates with me. The metaphor that we use at Animal Think Tank is an ecology. And social movements are often thought of as ecologies because ecologies are diverse, but they're also working in synergy and there's balance. And so when we look at past social justice movements, we find successful ones, we find that there are groups and organizations and individuals working with different approaches to social change. And often we find personal transformation, we find people building alternatives, and then there are organizations that are really trying to make structural change. And we can do that from the inside and from the outside. So that's like changing the rules of the game, lobbying and putting pressure on governments and corporations. All of those pieces are needed, and people on this panel, I think, represent many of those pieces. There's no one right way. It's the synergy between all of it that's going to really help us make transformative change. So at Animal Think Tank, we've got some key areas of work, one of which is trying to develop our grand strategy, which we hope is going to be useful for the rest of the movement as well. Because when we look at past social justice movements, they have identified high-level, long-term goals that they've been able to then build unity and momentum around to focus attention. And these are sort of goals which are very broad. If we look at the civil rights movement, we're thinking about desegregation, voting rights. If we look at the LGBTQ movement, we're looking at goals like marriage equality. So these are long-term goals, but they enable groups to be doing their own types of campaigning, whatever they're best at, whether it's direct action, whether it's lobbying government, but within the container of a long-term goal. So we're focusing our efforts. And so we're doing strategy work and consulting the movement on what strategic opportunities they see. We're also consulting the meat-eating public to see what opportunities there are to leverage public opinion. But aside from sort of unity and collaboration around strategic goals, what's really important is unity around narrative. And I think that's what got Tim really excited at our messaging event. And so we're doing a lot of public testing and research to find what are the most persuasive narratives that can shift people to pro-animal sentiments. And I think not only are we doing that through big surveys, focus groups, looking at the literature that's already out there, the other piece of that is we're trying to build narrative unity in the movement through running events like the one that Tim went to, and you were there as well, Claire. And we brought 25 organizations together, 50 people for 2 days to brainstorm, to connect, to share our research and start building our collective capacity in narrative, messaging, storytelling. And ultimately, what we see in terms of collaboration is, can we unify not the actual stories and the messages, but the wider and deeper narratives around a particular strategic milestone? That would be what I would have in my mind and our vision for the movement, or a part of the movement, to unify around a strategic goal for the next sort of 10 years, 5 years. And we're working to develop that goal and get feedback from the movement, and hopefully we'll be presenting what we found in sort of next year. So yes. I don't know, is that what you wanted, Tim?
Yes, that's brilliant. Thank you for that overview, Layla, because it is really exciting. And if you look at other social justice movements, so you mentioned the Freedom to Marry campaign, that really resonated with me, how in America the LGBTQ plus communities got together, and within a space of 11 years, they won over a whole country, they won over whole governments, they won over the president, they won over some of the most bigoted people in the world, and they did it through studying, research and unity, discussions, and actually paying attention to almost like the science of it. And I think the animal movement would really benefit it. So, Leila, your work is really crucial. But it is a long term. You mentioned 5-10 years. I've even heard you mention 40 years, which means I'm 60. I'll just be around by the time we get there. You know, I'll probably be about another 10 years to go. So I reckon I'll be 100. I'll be just about there for that. So if we're lucky. But so that's a longer term. And that's really important, I think, that, you know, we study this and we pay attention to that. Because if we're serious about our goals, we are a lot better if we work together than if we work apart. And I don't think anybody who's been in the vegan movement needs reminding that we've had the most almighty splits and, you know, lack of unity at times. That's not to say that's always the case, but there have been some alarming differences. And we need to get over them, find ways of doing that. And one, of course, ways of doing that is just working closer together, talking to each other, sharing ideas. And that's what I'll be asking our panellists here to do, really, is just talk about now a couple of campaigns they're already running or got in the pipeline that they would love to have a bit of a wider support from the movement. So on that note, I'm going to invite Claire to quickly talk about some of the things with the Vegan Society. And bear in mind, this is, you know, just general chat. We're building a consensus. There's no firm commitment here. You don't have to sign any documents. You just, let's explore where we can help each other a bit more.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Tim. Hi everyone, I'm Claire Oakley. I'm the Head of Campaigns, Policy and Research at the Vegan Society. And this is a really exciting, I think really crucial time for us to be talking about this issue. And it's something that in my role I've been thinking a lot about, kind of going forwards, the long-term strategy. So like you were saying, 5 years, 10 years, 40 years, 50 years, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to achieve? And how are we going to get there? So I'll tell you a little bit about the Vegan Society. I imagine most of you probably have heard of us. I hope you have. We're a membership organisation. We are going to celebrate our 80th anniversary next year. 80 years going. We invented the word vegan back in 1944, so we have that kind of claim to fame there. And our mission is to help people, everyone, go vegan and stay vegan. We do that in a really wide variety of ways. One of those ways is we accredit products. You've probably seen our trademark, the little sunflower with the V, creating more products for everyone to obviously have as alternatives. And then we do a lot of public-facing campaigns and policymaker-focused campaigns. And you were saying a bit earlier, Leila, about the kind of insider-outsider kind of split in terms of the movement. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot. So I very much view the Vegan Society's role as one where we are trying to do system change. So we do a lot of kind of lobbying of governments, both kind of central and devolved and local. We are trying to change the system, make it easier to be vegan within the kind of wider system, push for solutions at all different levels. So I come at it from that perspective. I think our job as the Vegan Society is to do lots of research on this issue, to kind of provide resources for people, to make it easier for people to make that change, and kind of encourage them in a positive way. And also that kind of lobbying and kind of influencing piece, I think, is very much our job. That's how I view it. So you may or may not be aware that we are the secretariat for the all-party parliamentary group on vegetarianism and veganism. And through that, we are trying to kind of engage with policymakers, get those issues onto the agenda at that level. And we obviously work with Vegetarian for Life. One of our partners there has a stall here today. We work with them to deliver that group. So that's what I think a good example of a partnership where we're trying to kind of work together. And then I would say another one that is very successful that we're a part of is the Plant-Based Food Alliance. Again, some people might have heard of it. Again, a kind of policy-focused group aiming to influence ministers, talk to MPs, talk at that level about our issues. It's very sector-focused. It's focused mostly on kind of the plant-based sector as a kind of industry, which I think is important in order to kind of sell the idea to policymakers. We talk a lot about economic growth. We talk a lot about the opportunities for the plant-based sector as a country, as the UK. And I think at this point in time, that's an important message for us to talk to the government. And we have quite a few people in that, a lot of other campaign groups, for example, Veganuary's in it, GFI, plant-based health professionals, a lot of people here today will be in that, but also a lot of industry leaders, so people like Oatly, people like Danone, people that have an interest in this area. And I think that's crucial for us to be talking to those people so that we've got them on board. We have them with an interest in this sector. We have them kind of committed. So I would say that's been an example of great success. And I would love to see something like that replicated for the animal focused groups. So people who are kind of actively pushing for animal liberation as their goal. So that is something I would love for us all to kind of maybe work towards and kind of have some sort of regular forum in a similar way that we do with the sector focused group.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. That's really interesting. You mentioned some really good collaborations. We had this last year, actually. We had a COP27 conference. We called it Collaborating on Positions, obviously a COP. But that was partly, we had the Plant-Based Food Alliance and all those people you mentioned represented. And that's a really good, example of a collaboration that's already happening. We could sort of enhance and improve on and maybe replicate. So thanks for that, Claire. And happy birthday next year, 80th anniversary. Isn't that incredible? Thank you. So Leah from the Plant-Based Treaty, who are the specialists in collaborators. They've been collaborating left, right and centre. Tell us more.
So I'm Leah from the Plant-Based Treaty. The Plant-Based Treaty is a bottom-up pressure campaign encouraging individuals, businesses, organisations and hopefully cities to switch towards plant-based food systems and away from animal agriculture. I think quite a few of you have already been to our stalls, so hopefully you know a little bit of backgrounds about us. But we started just over 2 years ago, and in those 2 years, we have now 120,000 individual endorsements globally. 22 cities have now endorsed us, with the London Borough of Lambeth just last week, and Edinburgh, Haywards Heath, and Norwich have also endorsed in the UK. So I'll talk a little bit about our cities campaign. We have a lot of different campaigns under the umbrella of the Plant-Based Treaty, but I'm a cities campaigner. So we send out emails to councils encouraging them to endorse us. And if a motion is passed and the city endorses the treaty, then we can start implementing strategic changes to move towards plant-based food systems and away from animal agriculture.
Brilliant. Thanks, Leah. And you know, Plant-Based Treaty really do collaborate with people. They really are reaching out. A very open organisation. They really see the value of working together. As Leah mentioned, quite new, last 2 years. Obviously, Vegan Society 8 years, Plant-Based Treaty 2.5 years, not quite. You know, we've got lots of interest in different instruments in the orchestra, shall we say. But particularly working on system change, and that's something that's quite new, I think, really. A lot of our focus has been on individual change and protecting individual animals and trying to help individuals go vegan. But it does require a different set of tactics and strategy. By nature, when you're dealing with system change, you've got to get consensus. So, you know, it's a different game in a way, but benefits from widespread support. So a new group that's really come up, probably only a year old or something, is it Plant-Based Unis? 2 years, made some incredible progress, got a whole string of universities to endorse the Plant-Based Treaty. So Alistair, is it?
That's right, yes.
That's good. Right, I've only met you once, and that was about 5 minutes ago, so I'm glad I remembered your name.
Nice to meet you,
Tim. Do tell us a bit more, because it's a really exciting, and obviously by nature quite kind of young and fresh compared with some of the old school people who've been doing this a long time. But I think there's also a pressure on younger people because they grow up with climate change, and it's a more pressing urgency, I think. Would I be right in saying that? So do tell us a bit about Plant-Based Unis and what what you're doing at the moment and you'd like some help on.
Cool, thank you, Tim. So my name's Alistair Stewart. I'm on the core team and a regional coordinator with Plant-Based Universities, which is an animal rising campaign, student-led campaign, and we exist in about 80 universities across the UK, Europe, and North America at the moment. And our aim is to, very simply, get universities transitioning to 100% plant-based catering on campuses, specifically as a response to the climate and nature crises. That's what we do, that's why we exist, and we are growing rapidly and having lots of success. As of Friday, we now have we have passed policy motions at 8 universities across the UK. It was Warwick on Friday. So Warwick will have a 100% plant-based, at University of Warwick, all students' union catering outlets will be 100% plant-based by 2027-28, and that's down to the work of the Warrior campaign, 7 other universities, all with slightly different policy motions. And in every case, they're all moving towards fully plant-based catering on campus. So that's what we're doing.
Fabulous. And, how can we support you a bit more, Alistair? What would you like to see from some of the groups, perhaps more established? What would you like to see from us all?
From the rest of the kind of vegan, animal rights, climate movement? Yeah, so I would say, I think there's a part of it that doesn't. So I'm new into the team. I've only been full-time for 2 months, and it's Misha and Nathan. Misha was on the panel yesterday, who lead with external relationships. So I think I have like a fair amount of uncertainty. I think that there is lots of good work that can be done in terms of providing campaigns with, for instance, like cooking demonstrations, providing them with free plant-based food and drink, basically giving the campaigns, like the teams of students at the universities, the resources they need to make themselves not just kind of there campaigning on campus, but making it look attractive, making it appealing to other students on campus, showing how nice, kind of tasty, nutritious, delicious plant-based food can be. And I think there's also important work, thinking about Vegan Society, about advising us on how to educate students who are at these universities, who are passing these plant-based motions, on how a plant-based diet fits into their life, because we are, one kind of element of pushback that we're getting from students who are voting on these motions is the old personal choice argument. It's my personal choice to eat meat, eat dairy, etc. And once we've passed a policy motion at that university, we have a responsibility to make sure that those students who voted against us, that we're taking them with us. And I think that education on the nutrition, on the health, environment, elements of eating a fully plant-based diet are a really important part of that.
And actually, you just jogged my memory because you mentioned the VegfestUK. I've just remembered, I was thinking about how much Animal Aid do, students. They do a lot of work with students. So always encouraging students to do cheap, student meals, so eat vegan on a budget and such like. Really good work. But Viva just told us yesterday that's their new campaign. They've just hired 2 new people specifically for the universities and mentioned about collaborating with yourselves. So there's a really good one that's coming up. I mean, Viva obviously really, really strong, really experienced, well-resourced and fantastic campaigns and, experience. And, they want to help with you. They want to work with you. And there's an example of just like, there's a young group coming up with a group that's now celebrating 30 years. And that's what we need to see a lot more of. So that's a great little one. Thanks, Alistair. Yes.
Yeah, I spoke to the Viva, the kind of Viva team yesterday, and I think that's really positive. I think it's very important to stress that plant-based universities exist solely for systems change. It's all about institutional change. We're not in the business of advocating for veganism. We deliberately don't use the V word, veganism, in our messaging and our strategy. It's all about getting students mobilized to join the team. And if they're not mobilized to join our campaign, it's about getting them voting in favor of our motion. So the kind of education piece about the benefits of plant-based dieting and health, that comes after the vote is passed. We're not trying to make vegans. We're trying to pass plant-based motions. And then big picture, longer term, I think plant-based universities is really, really exciting for me, for the work it does in terms of going into universities, getting young people, bringing them together, training them up, and then sending them into the world and seeing what they do. That's the part that kind of excites me most about PBU.
Right, so you touched on a really important part there that, your remit is system change. And system change is different from individual change. Where we can complement each other is, we need both. We've got to push for both. And obviously, individual change by nature pushes system change, but system change makes individual change more accessible and easier. So, for example, if you've just gone to university and you want to go vegan, if your university is providing plant-based meals, it's going to be a lot easier to get to grips. So that's how those both can work. And I think it's good to recognise there's different strategies. You mentioned you don't want to mention a V word. Other firms do. They can go in harmony. They shouldn't be in opposition, because once we recognise system change requires a different strategy from individual change, then the two can complement each other instead of perhaps conflicting. So it's interesting, we mentioned we've got animal liberation as a goal, but we've also got a shift to plant-based food systems as a goal. We've also got another one, which is called animal protection. An actual protection of animals, that are alive now, that deserve our protection. And that's represented by our group at the end, with Helen here from the Hunt Sabs. So Hunt Sabs are 60 years old this year. They were founded in 1963. We actually had one of the original Hunt Sabbers. I think Dave, what's his name? Dave. Oh, I've forgotten his name. Who? Dave Wetton, thank you. Dave was Hunt Sabbing in 1963. I was in Nappies actually in 1963, but I don't quite remember it. But Dave came to our show and he was sabbing in '63. That's really fascinating to bring that alive. So the Hunt Sabs are really interesting because they sort of stand alone in a way as very much a single focus for sabbing. But although they don't have a formal vegan outreach thing, they've always been a really big vegan outreach group just because the Hunt Sabs have a vegan culture within. Most Hunt Sabs are vegan. And if you're joining the Hunt Sabs and jumping in a van at 6 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to be getting a bacon butty out to chomp on because you'll be getting kicked back out of the van, I should think, fairly quickly. Maybe not. Maybe you'll get a bit of a help and a sauce mix sandwich thrown your way instead. But Hunt Sabs are very much part of our movement, an absolute intrinsic part of our movement, grassroots, a history, the uniqueness of the Hunt Sabs, but they also have a great part to play in helping other campaigns, helping with the general bigger picture. And so, Helen, thanks for joining us. You've collaborated already, actually. You had quite a big collaboration with Animal Rising this year, didn't you, for Aintree and Cheltenham?
Yeah. Hi, Tim. Thanks. Can everyone hear me? So I think a bit louder. I think most people know the Hunt Saboteurs, and most people understand Hunt Sabotage. And I think as Tim says, we're 60 this year. Our history has been one of groups being involved in animal rights in general. And I think a lot of people's contact with animal rights has been through their local SAB group. So SABs tend to be involved in local animal rights. And I think that's exactly what happened with horse racing. So whenever there's demos, and particularly for Aintree, local groups, Animal Rising, collaborated with local Hunt Sabs in Liverpool to create that action that created that publicity. And I think we're slightly on the periphery in a way, Hunt Sabs. Everybody knows us, everybody kind of knows what we do, but unless you're an active SAB, you don't really understand what that means. And I think, as Tim's already said, lots of people who get in our vans are not vegan when they start. And we don't expect people to be vegan to come and save hunted animals. But once they get to know people and they understand that the ethics of what we're doing, most of them will go vegan. So I'm going to say we've probably created quite a lot of vegans. But I think we're in that unique position where, and maybe this is slightly dissimilar to other groups, is that we are butting heads with the establishment on a regular basis. And I think, work like the Animal Think Tank is amazing because we should be using our force together to create change. But sooner or later, you're going to butt heads with the establishment, whether that's the farming lobby or it's, the Tories because they want to still kill things. You have to find a way to expose that. And I think that's where, certainly from a Hunt Sabotage point of view, real change happens. And I know we had another action where our Peterborough Sabs, who've been heavily involved in the Camp Beagle campaign against MBR, and it was their drone that got the footage of the beagles. So it was a collaboration between the camp and the local Sabs. And I think they've been quite instrumental in revealing what's been going on. And I think that's important, to share that information, to expose. Many of you will remember that we got the footage of the Hunting Office webinar where the Hunting Office members of Parliament, members of the judiciary and Lords basically said, yeah, we're still hunting, but we're just using trail hunting as a smokescreen. And I think once that was out there, that has really been the catalyst for the demise of hunting. Still a slow process, and particularly when you're fighting the establishment and you've got police who are hunting, judges who are hunting, and you're completely at odds with the establishment. But that exposure and that video went viral, and it wasn't just us, it wasn't just SABs sharing that information, it was lots of other groups. So I think there is power in that, and I think talking and learning, I think lots of activists could learn from being up close to people that are your enemy, if you like, and the police. I think there's been quite a lot of actions where, you know, knowing how to handle the police, knowing what your rights are, what the law is, I think is really invaluable. And I think hunt sabotage can bring self-esteem and confidence. And I think that is also what we need, confidence that we're right. We are right. We're on the side of right, all of us. And I think we could definitely, SABs can be quite insular, and I think we could definitely benefit from sharing some ideas and campaigns. We've got a current campaign about the upcoming election, where we're asking people to send a postcard to their MP saying they won't vote for cruelty, and we're hoping to finally get a proper ban on hunting. So that's one thing that people could help us with. But I would certainly be interested in chatting with other groups and learning how we can learn.
Fabulous. Thanks, Helen. Absolutely amazing. I think that collaboration that happened in April, we saw, you know, Animal Rising, credit, you know, a young group that's involved in direct action, and Hunt Sabs have got so much to offer from experience, as you mentioned, because there's not many direct action. And Layla, I know you point to your strategy as some mass demonstrations is a really important part of this. So we're building towards that. When we saw that collaboration of Animal Rising, and then we had, you know, Animal Aid and Viva both rolling out their campaigns. They do a lot of horse campaigns anyway, so it's all there in a locker, you know. But then we had Hunt Sabs getting involved. Then we had the Merseyside animal rights group. Is it Action for Animals? Merseyside Animal Rights Group got involved, and that's a real grassroots, you know, foot soldiers on the ground, as it were. And so we had this whole scope of, you know, 5 groups, all really, really different remits, all coming together and making a huge difference. I mean, if you remember the media, you know, I think there's something like 1,500 media interviews out of that. And I watched a lot of them. A lot of them were with right-wing, GB News, that kind of thing. Animal Rising won every single one. They took every single one. They knocked up back GB News, Piers Morgan, the lot, just ruined them. They had no chance because Animal Rising actually did some training and some practice. And they knew a lot they were on about. So that was amazing. So thanks for that, Helen. I do think that, you know, Hunt Sabs, again, is such an intrinsic part of our movement. They do so much work for the movement that people don't even know, really, like you said, about helping people go vegan. I would put Hunt Sabs down as one of the biggest vegan outreach groups in the UK today, just by default. And that's incredible. And tapping into that experience and knowledge, you know, and also that bravery, that courage, just inspiring people on a level to confront this injustice. And again, I point to that orchestra about how, you know, different tunes for different people. You know, if you can play the drums.
I think, Tim, we'd be the percussion section.
Yeah, I was just saying, you're the drums, so if you're on the drums, but then you need somebody on, I don't know, bassoon or whatever it is, somebody on the double bass. I'm not very good at orchestras, actually, more rock bands. But anyway, that concept of playing together is so important. So I'm going to go back to Layla now and ask you, Layla, you know, you're paying attention to the animal rights movement and the plant-based movement. Is there any collaborations that you'd like to see or other people to get involved with? Or do you think Animal Rising, Animal Think Tank could be more involved in other people's actions?
Thanks, Tim. Can I just say that I'm feeling very inspired, and I really want to talk to you, Helen, and you, Claire, about our strategy work, because I think there's so much. Well, actually all of you, but I'm very connected with Plant-Based Treaty and Animal Rising, so I've got a lot of info from you, but I just think there's so much good stuff going on here, and what I'm realizing is how little actually we know about what is going on behind the scenes. So yeah, feeling very hopeful right now. In terms of collaborations, I just wanted to say that Animal Think Tank is already collaborating with some organizations to help with their narrative and messaging and testing messages for campaigns to see, you know, which are the most resonant with the public. And one that we've been working on is the enforcement campaign by Animal Equality, to see if we can find messages that can be more radical and abolitionist. And it's like welfare is one step in, this direction that we want to go. Because I do think that there is, something around welfare. Much of the movement is working on welfare, but can we shift the narrative using the things that people are already doing? So we're doing that with animal equality. We've been offering informal feedback for people's campaign messaging. We've done that for a few groups. So if anybody's interested in any feedback informally, like we're quite at capacity, but like we'd be really, really happy to do that and to contribute with what we're finding. I can't remember your question, Tim.
Would you like to help? I mean, where would you, what campaigns would you see that you'd really like to get involved with too, that other people are doing?
So I think for us, as you know, we feel that there is a big gap in terms of the shifting public opinion using the outside game. So we're also about system change, but more on the putting outside pressure. And fundamentally, we need a moral paradigm shift and public opinion to shift for then the inside game to be able to make more radical asks. And so the things that I think that I'm very inspired by and I think can really shift public opinion and really powerful is open rescue. Open rescue, which many of you probably would be following DXC and Wayne Chung, who's been put in prison on conspiracy charges. But I think, and I think Animal Rising is also has done some open rescues, both as a tactic, but I think DXC is doing it more as a strategy. And I think there is so much potential because as much as investigations are so important, they can also, the empathy, like you can't have empathy for loads of animals, but when you've got the story of one animal and seeing the sacrifice that activists are making in order to put their freedom on the line. And I just think that's really, really powerful and can shift public opinion. And if we can build a mass open rescue movement, we would be so behind that and we'd be really interested in that.
Really interesting. Yeah, that's a great idea.
And there's another thing that I think, but as I said, a lot of the movement, at least the professionalized NGOs, are looking at sort of welfare. I'm really interested, and we're really interested in Animal Think Tank. What are the strategic pathways that can actually get us to personhood or chipping away at the property status of animals and really get to that root cause? And Advocates for Animals, I don't know if people have heard of ED from Advocates for Animals, Animal Law Foundation. They're doing strategic litigation to really start chipping away at the property status. They're starting with dogs because most people do not see dogs as property, including judges, including the public. And I just think it's very strategic, and I think there's a lot the outside game can do to shift public opinion and make it much more possible. We start with dogs are family members, and expand that circle out to fundamentally then pigs, chickens, cows. So I think there's lots of interesting things, and we as Animal Think Tank would like to support and offer resources to all of the groups in the movements. Like the messaging work that we're doing, I think would be relevant for all of the groups in terms of the narratives. What are the narratives that can really shift people? Is that...
Brilliant. And one of the problems is that, that our movement has not done enough research. So we know what we want to say, but we don't pay attention to how other people respond to it. So, for example, I know some of the research you've done recently, if you want to talk challenging property status, a challenging property status is one of the most difficult things, I think, for advocates to do. It's a tough one. It takes some skill. But the research has shown that I paid attention. I've got to say, I put it into practice with my builder the other day. I've got somebody rebuilding doing a bit of repair work. I was talking to him, and I threw in this moral consideration. I talked to him, I said, but do you think there's a moral consideration? Animals, do you think they have a value? Is there a moral question here? And he's going, yeah, I do actually. And he was really responsive, and although he eats meat and, he talked about that, and I could tell that there was some seed sown, but the research shows if you start throwing up, if I talk to him about speciesism or exploitation, whoosh, up come the shutters. And that conversation wouldn't have grown. So the message is the same. I want him to challenge himself in his own, but using the right words or words that the research shows. And it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's good guidelines. And all our groups could benefit from that and learn more. And I would just throw in, Lola, you mentioned about animal rescue. It's brilliant. Can we ask all our groups to just do a little bit more for the animal sanctuaries? Because they seem to get left out of the script. I'd love to see all our groups adopt, Yes.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you were saying about the one animal and that focus. And I think in hunting, we've always, our fight is about a bunch of bullies going after one wild animal, okay? And that's an unfair fight. And I think that's why we have public support. So about 70%, it varies, but about 70% of the public are against hunting wild animals with dogs. But obviously that's not enough because of the elite minority that go hunting. But I think that clearly shows, doesn't it, that why are we prepared to put effort into protecting one wild animal who is free, but actually all the other animals that are property are somehow seen differently? So I think that's a really interesting take on things.
Thank you. I agree.
Just on that mention, one of my fondest ones to talk about that is, the Kurt Zuma and the cat. So if you remember Kurt Zuma, the footballer, and his brother kicking the cat around, that was caught on camera. This is how I explain animal rights to people. Because, everybody, the whole country was up in arms to that. There's nobody who said, oh, that's okay to kick the cat around. And when you boil it down, if you look at it and the philosophy of it, it's like, well, why? It's like, because we all understand that the cat has a right not to be used as a football. And everybody gets that. You can explain that to a 5-year-old. Everybody gets that point. So actually, animal rights, the concept of upholding the rights of animals not to be commodified, is already in our culture. It already exists. And that narrative, that Kurt Zuma, everybody remembers, Kurt Zuma and the cat. It's that single cat has transformed, a whole group of people into understanding what animal rights actually means. And that's again, that's really powerful. So thanks, Helen, Lola, thanks for that. Claire, what would you see quite a lot. You're paying attention to other groups. What do you see out there that you think the vegan society could get behind a bit more?
I suppose in answer to that, I think one of the things I would say is it's so important as a whole, as a movement as a whole, that we're all pushing in different ways. And like you said, I think there's plenty of space for all of us to push in whatever way that is kind of our area of expertise. So whether it is direct action, whether it is mobilizing protests, whether it is kind of talking to students at universities and getting change on that level, I think it's incredibly important that we are all pushing really hard and are using those different skills. But like I said kind of previously, that we're connected, we know what each other is doing, and we're kind of across it and can make kind of references to each other and connect each other and connect the people that kind of volunteer and support us as well, and make sure we're all kind of pushing at those different areas. That's one of the things I think is most important. So I think we are going to be looking at trying to convene some sort of group in this area in the near future, so that we can know, that we're not duplicating work, that we're not all kind of going after one area that actually people are already working in or making plans to sort of amplify. And one of the things I would say we're doing, having quite a bit of success with is, you might well be aware that the Vegan Society was very involved in establishing the case that proved that veganism was a protected characteristic. And obviously that's then given us a lot of leverage with that kind of legal win to push and make sure that vegans' rights are being respected in all different kinds of areas. So whether that's in their workplace, if they're in school, if they're in hospital, it's an area that we work on. And one of the things that we've released recently is our Catering for Everyone report, where we've been trying to assess how far councils across the country are aware of that right that vegans have to have their rights protected and access to appropriate food. So we've actually sent freedom of information requests to all councils in the UK to understand whether they are respecting that right, and then whether they're providing vegan food as standard in all their kind of catering settings, both inside and kind of their external sites as well. So I think it's something that can link up quite well with, for example, plant-based councils, and we've had quite a bit of dialogue with them as well on this topic. And we've had some success in asking our volunteers, our supporters, to get behind that, to use our tools on our website to write to their local councillors and express their kind of, depending on what the result was in terms of whether their council respected those rights, to kind of engage. And we've had a lot of success there already with people kind of coming back to us and saying, oh, my councillor has said this, they're going to try and work in this group, they're going to try and get options, do you want to meet with them, do you want to talk more about why they should be providing vegan food, not just from a rights perspective, but also from obviously the environmental perspective as well. So I think there I would highlight the real benefit of kind of, you could call it more insider action, where people are talking to their representatives, personally engaging, using evidence that we've created. And I think that like mobilization piece, like I think you were saying with your supporters as well, is really important, getting them to talk to their representatives, because that can, I know we're all a little disillusioned with the state of the sort of general government and the way we're being run, but I think especially at the kind of local levels, I have seen actual change happen from that. Like people do listen. Some people do care about representing their constituents. So if enough of us push and we're enough of us kind of connect up those dots, I do think we'll see more and more change. But we have to be connected. We have to kind of keep talking to each other and making sure we're kind of not duplicating, not stepping on each other's toes, but amplifying.
Yes. And while you were speaking, I was just thinking of a really good potential collaboration from Vegan Society here, Plant-Based Treaty here. Both have done a lot of work with prisons. So I know that the Vegan Society has really done a lot of work with prisons, trying to get plant-based food options into prisons, especially looking after animal rights activists who are in prison. Have really good a wealth of going back probably 20, 30 years, I would guess. And I know that Plant-Based Unis last year came out with a blueprint to put to place like prisons, hospitals, all institutions about how to increase their plant-based options. And obviously the answer would be with prisons is to grow all their own food and switch to a plant-based menu. So there's a potential of shared resources.
Yeah.
Where
I've just mentioned we have actually endorsed people endorsing the plant-based treaty as part of our Catering for Everyone campaign, and in our report, so I don't know if that's me. In our report, we actually say that it's one of the actions council can take. It's one of the things we ask for. So it's a real link up between us because we recognise that important work that you guys are doing. So it's like I say, it's kind of about amplifying and not kind of competing.
Yeah, and that is really important because all the groups are autonomous. They've all got their individual stamp on things. They've got their own remits. It's very important that we do complement each other and not compete. And I think where we've come from the history of animal rights movement is that we have been competing quite a lot. And that's because there's been so few of us. But as we've grown and we've become stronger and better resourced, we've been able to reach out more and share. And I point to Viva, a really big change. I mean, Viva 20 years ago probably wouldn't have collaborated like they are now. Now they really are, and they're COP28 next week. They're specifically saying it's a collaboration with the groups. And it's changed the culture. And that's really important. And we're not just talking about the UK here, we're talking global. And I know for a fact that there's other countries watching what we're doing here and how that's going. And this whole idea of just talking together, sharing, it doesn't have to be formal, there doesn't have to be anything signed. It's just got to be a mindset that says, yeah, you know what, there's an opportunity, let's go for it, let's talk. It might not be. We may decide not to, but that's okay. We find where we can collaborate and then we really go for it. So, Leah, come on, what's next for Plant-Based Treaty? What are we going to be helping you with next? No, what are you looking to help other people with?
Completely agree with what you say, Tim. It is really important to collaborate with each other because, I've been in the sort of animal rights movement for more than 16 years now, and we were a lot smaller back then. And it's incredibly inspiring seeing so many new groups coming out, and on a personal level as well, switching from being more of sort of on the street activist, kind of more similar to the animal rising type campaigns, and now moving on to kind of like councillor government lobbying based campaigns. And it's very interesting seeing that kind of shift, because when I was like an on the street activist, I never really thought about writing to my councillors, to be honest. Like I don't think I ever really wrote to any councillors. I didn't really think petitions worked. And now my mind has been changed quite a lot. And I never thought I would say that. So it's actually very inspiring for me to see the work that we've done just in the last 2 years and other sort of similar types of campaigns have achieved in that time. And also like emailing local councillors and receiving personal responses and seeing that they actually do, not all of them, but some of them do care about what their constituents want. And also where we've seen this there's been more debate about what to do about the climate crisis and things like this, which I don't think that was even really mentioned when I first got involved in animal rights. So it's kind of now another narrative that we can talk about and say, look, there's so many reasons why we should be vegan. We've animal rights, the environment, our health, like we've got so many things behind us to back our cause.
And, councillors and governments do need to listen to those reasons. So, I think it's really important that we all collaborate together, because obviously the Vegan Society have been around for, 60, 80 years? Wow, yeah. So, and we're all doing a lot of very similar campaigns as well. On the Plant-Based Treaty store, we often get asked if we are the Plant-Based Unis or the Plant-Based Councils campaign. So there are a lot of similar campaigns. So I think if we all collaborate together and join forces, we can be really, really strong.
Yeah, and it's almost just as simple as just amplifying the voices. So when the petitions come around, like, Plant-Based Treaty had a petition to get COP28 to adopt plant-based menus, we could have amplified that by, if we have 50 groups sharing that instead of 5, we'd have hit 100,000 that would be a really amplified voice. So, the idea of amplifying each other's voices is crucial. And the work that Animal Think Tank are trying to, get a kind of shared consistency to that is likewise really important. So thank you, Lee, and well done, Plant-Based Treaty, and Plant-Based Unis. You're really fresh, up and coming. I think you kicked us all up the proverbial and got us all thinking about how to do better, and that's really important. A movement really needs fresh input, but it also needs experience, and we need to meet. And I will say, on behalf of my elders and a lot of us who go back, I don't think our original old school, we've all tried hard, but I don't think we've left the best landscape for the up-and-coming activists. But I think we can really address that really quickly, and within another year or two we could have really addressed that. We already are, so it's really reassuring and encouraging. But Alistair, I'm always interested in somebody a third of my age about what they view and where they see this. So I find it really interesting too. So what do you see that plant-based unis could get more involved with? I would imagine Plant-Based Treaty is a fairly, clear one that you support, but what else do you see?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of overlap there, Tim. I think it's important to say, I think you said earlier on that we're passing motions that ask students to endorse the Plant-Based Treaty, which isn't the case. They're separate, but there is a lot of overlap, and we are doing similar things. And I think the collaboration there is. There's
some confusion between Plant-Based Treaty. There's always some confusion between Plant-Based Treaty and Plant-Based Uni, so even Tim's getting confused.
So maybe that's on us. Maybe we need to be clearer in our messaging, and so that's something for us to think about. I think otherwise, I think that, as I said, a massive advantage, exciting thing about plant-based universities as a campaign is this idea of training up and then sending into the world, or into the real world and into the world of animal rights, environmental activism, people who've just graduated from university. And I know it's the case that over the next 2-3 years, there'll be people who are, PBU, who maybe went vegan because they were exposed to other people in PBU who are vegan, who then go out and join groups like Plant-Based Treaty and every single other organization on this panel. I think that's already the case in some cases. So I hope that's what we as a campaign can give to you.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, Plant-Based Unis, university is such great fertile grounds for activism, isn't it? I think Plant-Based Unis could really play a central role in that, in encouraging and supporting all sorts of different activism, and using their established networks to help amplify other groups like Animal Rising and such like. So that's great. Thank you for that. So Alistair, thanks for that. Helen, we're going to wrap up soon. We're nearly on 4 o'clock. Or after 4 o'clock. Well, 4:01, so we won't be too long, but we're going to invite a few questions too. So Helen, if you'd like to just talk about what you see perhaps, that maybe Hunt Subs could perhaps share some petitions in their newsletters, or just amplify a few campaigns.
I think I was just going to say the Plant-Based Uni thing is really interesting to us, because there was a time, and it was kind of in the late 80s, early 90s, that nearly every single university had a SAB group attached to it, and that was where recruitment was done. So it would be great if maybe you could, take some material into the universities. That would be good. But yeah, I'm sure there are. In terms of collaboration, I definitely think sort of that intellectual thinking, analytical attitude to campaigns. We're not struggling to convince the public. That's not our fight, really. But if there is something we can offer, we have, a decent mailing list. We have our supporters, and obviously generally they're vegan or they're open to veganism or vegan thinking or plant-based thinking. So it would have to be a committee decision for us. We're a volunteer-run organisation, so it would have to be, what do people think about sharing information from other groups online and in our magazines, which I'm sure we could do. Articles are always welcome, but we're quite staunchly, anti-hunt. So it's going to be a bit of a battle, but I think it's worth it, actually. And I think with the election coming up, there's definitely things other people can do for us to support that, to get rid of the Tories and get hunting back.
We just collaborate to get rid of the Tory government.
Can we just do that?
Yeah, let's just do that. That would be a start for
It would, wouldn't it? But yeah.
And get them in prison too for their crimes.
Yeah. So I'm sure there are things that we can do for other organisations and to push things. I think people are used to our very single-minded message, and I think probably that works for us. But yeah,
I think the important thing is to recognise that, our own campaigns. Well, I think one of the things is if we can support a campaign that takes nothing away from our own, that's when we can reach out. And there's also an important divide here that we need to cross, which is there's a plant-based food systems and then there's an animal liberation. And I would love to see, actually, Alistair, I was going to mention to you, I would love to see plant-based unis getting behind, even if it's behind the scenes, not necessarily in public, behind the anti-vivisection movement. And obviously universities is where the bulk of animal experimentation goes on. And, if somehow we could help, if that plant-based uni network was really growing, was able to introduce a bit of support for, say, animal AIDS campaigns against, animal testing, then you've got a plant-based uni, a plant-based food system campaign actually actively supporting an animal liberation campaign. And by doing so, of course, this crosses the divide, because how many times do you see people on Facebook going, oh, you're not a proper vegan, you're just plant-based, and then plant-based people going, hey, just stop being so militant and extremist, and it's like, no, there's nothing extremist about the animal rights position or about switching to plant-based food systems, and they are compatible, they are different. But we could be working so much more together than we are when we work apart. And as you know, in the animal rights movement, unfortunately, we quite often go hammer and tongs at each other. And we're still doing that. We're picking on each other and really going after and lambasting each other for some perceived lack of something or other somewhere.
That's because they all need to come sabbing and vent some aggression.
Yeah. So, okay, look, we're going to wrap up in a minute. Thank you ever so much. I'll just mention we had a panel yesterday. This is, we had Animal Rising, we had Animal Aid, we had Animal Justice Project, we had Viva and We the Free yesterday. Really heavyweight groups that are all collaborating. That was filmed. You should be able to see that on our, we'll circulate these. There was also 2 really good panels we did at Bristol 2 months ago, where 8 groups joined us, and I'm thrilled that now we've got 10 groups, Vegan Society and Hunt Sabs coming on board, talking about this. There's more. There's an invitation to Freedom for Animals, and they're in the audience. They're going to be joining us next time. And there's lots of other groups, Animal Equality, you mentioned, and some of the welfare groups, the Humane League. There's all sorts of groups that we could be working with. So, are there any questions? Would anybody like to ask a question? Yes, I'm going to ask you to come up and speak into the mic so that we can hear you. Oh, here's Freedom for Animals.
It's just a quick question. You've been talking about plant-based. You've been talking about plant-based treaty, plant-based councils, plant-based universities. What about plant-based schools? I think it's very, very important if anyone will work with plant-based schools. It's just
So we are.
yeah.
No?
Okay.
Schools. Yes. Vegan Society and Animal Aid.
Yeah. Well, Animal Aid, of course, does great school speaker program. So that's one. They go into schools and talk about, obviously, animal rights to audiences of students, I believe it is. Pro-Veg, obviously, go to do a lot of work with school plates, and they're a fantastic group, and they do have lots of success there, actually kind of changing menus in the schools. We, of course, have an education officer, Laura Chapman, who's actually here doing a talk today. She goes into schools, does a lot of vegan inclusive education work, training teachers trying to get veganism recognised on the curriculum, vegan rights protected in schools, vegan children have their rights respected. So yeah, that's very much an area that a lot of us are working on. And I think Laura works a lot with ProVeg as well. They're linked up. So yeah, it's actually great. It's a whole other collaboration that we didn't actually get to talk about earlier. So I think that's great.
Can I jump in there as well? What a great one, yeah. So here's plant-based unis too.
Thanks. And Animal Rising is setting up a plant-based schools campaign as we speak. So in particular, we're interested in getting 16, 17, 18-year-olds, sixth formers currently at school, doing what plant-based universities are doing, so training them up. We're hoping to run a summer camp next summer and then send them into the schools and campaign for 100% plant-based catering in schools. So please speak to me if you would like more information about that, especially if you are or know current school pupils, but also if you're teachers, students, etc.
Wonderful, thanks. So thank you for that question. Is there another question? Anyone else want to raise a hand, ask a question? Going. Go on. Thank you. So thank you very much for listening, folks. And all I can say is please do keep an eye on this and do encourage your groups. Let them know that how valuable this is. You know, we all want to hear and we want to feed into this. And it's an organic growth. No one's controlling it. No one's micromanaging it. It's all about coming from within the groups, within the volunteers, within the movement to get on one page. All I can say is the animals need us to accelerate it. The climate needs us to. Climate change, we need to accelerate this. So the quicker we can to get through this work, the better. And on behalf of all the groups and all the people involved, thank you very, very much for giving this consideration, and particularly for the groups who are really changing this mindset and culture. It's been a long time coming, but it's, for me, the most exciting thing I've seen in the last 40 years. So thank you, folks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming to VegFest. Thank you for all the panel. And we will be back next summer. We're going to have a conference. So it's just hot off the press. I haven't even asked any of you yet, but you'll be invited to a conference next summer where we're really going to go into this and really focus on this and give it some attention. We're going to try and engage with the public, the activists in the UK, get them voting. Let's get some real engagement with how we develop this sort of unity message. Oh yeah, COP28, there's a Viva March next Saturday. Please do get along. It's one of the biggest collaborations we've seen in the UK to date. And that is something we would love to see everybody at. On that note, I shall put the microphone down and say thank you very much and hurry up and get some cake before we shut because they'll be selling out soon. Thank you.